I should have known from the way she touched me. Her fingers, soft, elegant, felt like silk over my skin. But beneath that caress, there was something wrong. Pressure, a weight I couldn't explain. Like her hand wasn't made of flesh and bone, but something older, something watching me. They called her Seraphine, a name so delicate. It fluttered like lace when whispered. To the world, she was the jewel of Hollow Manor. Her beauty the kind sung about by bards and scribbled in love-struck letters. To me, she was salvation, or so I believed. I was drowning in debt after father died. Our estates crumbled into ruin, creditors circling like wolves. And then she came, like a dream, offering her hand, her wealth, her grace. She saved my family name. She wore white when we wed. Her smile, radiant under cathedral light, almost made me forget she never spoke of her own family, of her past, of where she came from. I thought it was mystery. Now, I know it was a warning. The first night, our wedding night, I couldn't sleep. The manor groaned in ways unfamiliar. I'd grown up in stone houses all my life, but Hollow Manor breathed. The air tasted damp, metallic, like something had been freshly carved behind the walls. She stood by the window, looking out at the garden. Her white nightgown caught the moonlight like frost, hair cascading like ink. And then, she said it, soft, like a lullaby wrapped in velvet. The moon is perfect tonight. It awakens what's buried. I laughed. I thought she was being poetic. I even kissed her bare shoulder, whispered some clumsy flirtation. She didn't smile. She just turned, and for the briefest moment, her eyes caught the moonlight wrong. They glowed. No, not just reflected. They burned, a pale gold, like the eyes of a hungry owl. Predatory, still, unblinking. But I blinked, and they were just eyes again. Soft, human, kind, right? She made love like a woman possessed, graceful and savage. She kissed like she wanted to own my soul, not share it. And when she climaxed, her breath changed. Less moan, more snarl. I remember freezing. Her mouth had opened wider than it should have. Her teeth. For a moment, I swear they weren't flat. They gleamed. But by morning, she was Seraphine again. Gentle, glowing. Her lips pressed to mine like rose petals in spring. Was it a dream? Or the wine? I told myself I was imagining it. That I was tired. Newlywed jitters. But when I stepped out of bed, the soles of my feet stuck. There, on the floorboards, blood. A smear of it. Not mine. Not hers. Just there. She followed my gaze, eyes wide with mock innocence. A bird must have flown in, she said, wrapping her arms around me. You sleep so deep, you don't even hear the windows open. Her voice was syrup, but there was something behind her eyes, waiting. And that was when I first heard it. Far below the manor, deep beneath stone and soil, a sound. Scraping. Not pipes. Not rats. Claws. I didn't move. I didn't speak, because her head was on my chest now, and I could feel her breathing in my heartbeat. Like it was nourishment. Like it was hers. And somewhere behind her gentle kiss, I heard her whisper, "You smell just like the last one." I didn't ask. I didn't flinch. I just smiled, like a fool, and kissed her forehead, because my body had frozen, but my mind had already started to run. They said old houses creak, that the wood shifts with the wind, that age seeps into the walls and makes everything whisper. But the sounds in Hollow Manor weren't whispers. They were warnings. The morning after the blood-stained floor, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. A bird. A bad dream. My nerves. But something inside me, some quiet, primal instinct, had begun to stir. A voice I'd never heard before. A voice that said, "Watch her." At breakfast, Seraphine was radiant. She wore a silk robe the color of bone, her hair swept into a careless knot, lips painted the color of crushed cherries. She smiled at me like nothing had happened. "Sleep well, my love?" she asked, pouring tea. Her hands were graceful, but her nails, I could swear they were longer than yesterday. Sharper, almost pointed. Yes, I lied, though I hadn't slept a wink. As she sipped from her porcelain cup, I noticed a deep red stain at the corner of her mouth. I thought it was lipstick, but when she licked it away, it was thicker, darker. She caught me staring and smiled wider. "The tea's a bit strong this morning." And just like that, she turned the page of her book, unconcerned. That was when Bastian, the house steward, knocked. He was pale, shaking, old, with a spine bent from decades of loyal service. He never met Seraphine's gaze, always stared just past her shoulder, like something behind her was more dangerous than the woman herself. "My lady, my lord," he said, bowing stiffly. We cannot find Miriam." Miriam was one of the young maids, 17, maybe 18. She'd been the one who brought me towels the night before. I remembered her humming softly, nervously, as she passed my door. I remembered the way she looked over her shoulder, as if afraid of being watched. Now, she was gone. Seraphine didn't react, didn't blink, probably ran off, she said, folding her napkin. "These girls come and go, don't they, Bastian?" Bastian flinched. His eyes briefly met mine. They said something his lips couldn't. "Help us. My lady." She never collected her wages. Her belongings are still in the maid's wing. Seraphine stood, slowly, the silk of her robe whispering against her skin. "Then look harder," she said, her voice suddenly colder. "I'm sure you'll find her tucked away somewhere. Or perhaps the forest claimed her. The night is not always kind." The room dropped several degrees. I felt the chill wrap around my spine like fingers. Later that afternoon, I ventured down the servants' hall. The walls here were narrower, darker. The gas lamps flickered too easily. Miriam's room was small, just a cot, a trunk, a mirror clouded with dust. But everything was in place. Her shoes by the bed, her comb on the vanity, a letter to her sister, unfinished. The last line read, "I heard it again last night, the breathing under the floor. I don't think it's rats." And then, nothing. The ink trailed off in a jagged line. As I stepped backward, something crunched beneath my foot. A shard of porcelain. I picked it up. A piece of a teacup, the exact design as the ones in the dining room. But it was smeared with something dark. Not tea. Blood. That night, I tried to confront Seraphine gently. "You've been here longer than anyone. Have there ever been disappearances before?" She didn't look up from her book. "You think I'm hiding something?" she asked softly. "No." I lied again. "I just want to understand this place. Hollow Manor. Its history." She closed the book and stood. "Come with me," she said, extending her hand. She led me down a corridor I hadn't noticed before, past the tapestries, past the grandfather clock that hadn't ticked in years, to a door with no handle. She reached into her bodice and pulled out a key, silver, etched with symbols I didn't recognize. When the door opened, the air hit me like rot, cold, damp, earthy. "This," she whispered, "is the heart of Hollow Manor." Stone steps descended into darkness. At the bottom, the walls were carved with strange symbols, bones embedded in the mortar. Small ones, human, childlike. "They built this place atop old ground," she said, her voice echoing. "The kind of ground that doesn't stay silent for long." I should have turned. I should have run. But I followed her. At the far end of the tunnel was a locked iron gate. Behind it, I saw the glint of something metallic. Shackles. And on the wall, a smear of blood in the shape of a handprint. Small. Feminine. Miriam's. "Do you hear it?" she asked. I didn't. First. And then, yes. Breathing. Deep. Wet. Hungry. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. She leaned in, her lips close to my ear. "Because you're mine now, and I want you to see what you'll become." I didn't sleep. Not after what I saw in that chamber beneath Hollow Manor. The blood-streaked walls, the sound of breathing in the dark, the chains. And her, Seraphine. She kissed my forehead when we returned to our chambers. Her lips were warm, gentle, possessive. But I couldn't stop shaking. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the iron gate again. The handprint, the blood. And I remembered what she whispered. "You're mine now, and I want you to see what you'll become." What did she mean? Why show me? Why now? Something was unraveling. And whatever spell she had woven with her beauty, her wealth, her whispered affection, it was thinning. I could feel the truth bleeding through. By dawn, I was up, pacing the halls in silence. The manor, as always, seemed aware. The portraits lining the corridors watched with glassy eyes. One of them, an oil painting of a man I'd never noticed before, had been slashed across the mouth. When I leaned in, I saw something had been carved into the frame beneath it. She waits beneath the skin. I didn't understand it then, but it would make sense soon enough. I returned to my bedchamber. The silence was thick, as if it were pressing against my ears. I kept glancing at Seraphine, sleeping on her side, hair cascading like a black veil over the pillow. She looked peaceful, angelic, but I knew now that her face was a mask. It was then that I noticed the floorboard, near the wardrobe, warped, slightly raised, a flaw in a house this immaculate. I knelt and pressed my fingers into the edge. It gave way with a creak so soft it sounded like a breath. Beneath the wood was a narrow cavity, dusty, cobwebbed, and inside, wrapped in an old velvet cloth, was a journal, leather-bound, cracked. The initials TR were burned into the cover. I didn't recognize the name. The pages were brittle, but the ink had survived. And as I flipped through, the horror unfolded, slow, suffocating, familiar. Entry 1. She arrived on a night without stars. The villagers said Hollow Manor had found its mistress. I thought they meant me, but they spoke of her, Seraphine. Entry 5. She is flawless. Her voice makes me forget things, simple things, where I am, what day it is. She says I needn't worry. That time bends around love. Entry 13. I found blood on the stairs. She said it was mine, that I had fallen, but I have no wounds. I cannot remember the fall. Entry 22. There's something in the cellar. I hear it breathing. She says it's the pipes. But I followed the sound, and I found chains. Entry 28. I saw her reflection in the mirror, but it wasn't hers. Her eyes, they glowed. Her teeth, God help me, they were too long. Entry 31. She's feeding, not on food, not on wine, but on us, on me. I feel drained, hollow. My skin is losing color. My memories, my will, everything is unraveling. She kisses me and I forget why I'm afraid. Final entry. If you're reading this, you are already hers. Don't trust her touch. Don't believe her tears. She is not a woman. She is the echo of something buried. And when she says you're hers, it's not a vow. It's a sentence. Couldn't breathe. The journal trembled in my hands. I looked at Seraphine, still sleeping, but as if sensing my gaze, her eyes snapped open. Not slow, not drowsy, instant. She didn't move, just stared, watching, like a wolf pretending to sleep in sheep's clothing. I slipped the journal back under the floorboard, heart thundering. If she knew I'd read it, if she suspected, I didn't know what she would do. Bad dreams? She asked, her voice silk-wrapped knives. I nodded, barely speaking. Just shadows. She smiled, but her eyes didn't. That afternoon I found Bastian again. The steward. The only one in this house who seemed to know the truth but was too terrified to speak it. I cornered him in the greenhouse, where the light couldn't hide behind oil lamps and flickering sconces. Who is TR? I asked him, his hands clenched. His eyes darted toward the house, like it might be listening. You found the journal, he whispered. God help you. Tell me the truth. He hesitated. Then, finally, in a voice thin with fear, Thomas Redley, the last husband, the one before you, he vanished. We buried an empty coffin. She said he left, but we knew. We knew he never stepped foot outside again. Why didn't you warn me? I asked. He looked me dead in the eyes. Would you have believed us? When you first saw her, when she smiled at you, men have killed kingdoms for less. I said nothing, because he was right. I had seen the red flags, the missing past, the too perfect beauty, the house with locked doors and blood under the floorboards. But I ignored it all, because I wanted to believe, because love is the easiest way to walk into the arms of a monster. And now I was inside the cage. That night, I locked my door, not because I thought it would keep her out, but because I needed the illusion of control. I set the journal beside my pillow like a weapon. My mind raced with plans: escape, confrontation, confession. But as I drifted towards sleep, I heard it, scratching, not at the window, not at the walls, beneath the bed, and then a whisper no louder than breath. Reading won't save you, my love. It didn't save the last one either. There are sounds you cannot unhear. The whisper beneath my bed still echoes. Reading won't save you, my love. The voice was hers, but not her voice. Not the one she used during daylight, when she poured tea and laughed like wind chimes. This voice came from beneath her skin. Older. Starving. I didn't sleep again. Couldn't. I stayed awake with the journal pressed to my chest like scripture. Every candle in the room burning. Shadows curled at the edges of the flame. They waited. They always wait. By morning, I felt the heaviness in my blood. The weight of knowledge. That feeling when you realize the house you've been living in was never your own. Just a trap with curtains. I tried to speak to Bastian again. To plan. To run. But he was gone. Not dismissed. Not sick. Vanished. The new girl, Eliza, young, maybe 16, whispered it to me as she dusted the second-floor gallery. They say he slipped away at dawn, but his boots are still at the foot of his bed. His candle was still burning. The covers still warm. I didn't react. Not outwardly. But inside, my stomach turned to ice. 2 disappearances. In 1 week. And now no one left who dared speak the truth. That evening I searched the manor. Room by room. Chamber by chamber. I opened drawers, lifted carpets, pressed on walls like a lunatic looking for passageways. And then, in the west corridor, one I had always found strangely colder than the rest, I found the mirror. It had always been there. Tall. Framed in gilded ivy. But something about it seemed wrong. Like it watched back. I stood before it, studying myself. My eyes were bloodshot. My skin pale. I looked more like a ghost than a lord. And that's when I saw it. Not in the reflection. Behind it. A red smear barely visible. Near the top edge of the glass. I moved closer. Closer still. And then a crack. Not the mirror. The wall behind it. With trembling hands, I pried the frame loose. It was heavier than it should have been. Backed with thick oak, likely to muffle what was hidden. Behind it, the wallpaper had been peeled away. And scrawled beneath in jagged crimson letters, "Beauty is a cage. Do not trust her face." I stepped back. My heart slammed against my ribs. And then I noticed. The red was wet. Fresh. I dropped the mirror. It shattered. Glass shards slicing across the wood like ice daggers. But I didn't care. I needed answers. And then came the scream. High. Feminine. Cut off too fast. From the eastern hall. I ran. Through the corridor. Past rooms that had once felt warm and rich. Now empty and humming with silence. I followed the sound to the atrium. The chandeliers above swayed, though there was no wind. The doors were wide open, moonlight pouring in. And there she stood. Seraphine. Not a hair out of place. Draped in black lace this time. Barefoot. Her skin glowing like porcelain under the moon. "You shouldn't be running," she said gently. Couldn't breathe. "Where is Bastian?" She tilted her head. A smile at the corner of her mouth. Just enough to show teeth. Gone. Like they all go. Like you will, too, if you keep looking behind mirrors. I stepped back. Her shadow stretched across the floor. Longer than it should have. Thinner. Twitching. You killed them," I whispered. She laughed. "Such a crude word, my love. They were given. Gifted. The manor requires sacrifice. Always has." I stared at her, unable to move. Her beauty shimmered. Perfect skin. Lush lips. But now I saw the flickers underneath. A movement beneath her flesh. Like her face wasn't solid. Like it shifted with every word. And then she stepped forward. "But you," she said, voice velvet-wrapped poison. You're special. You see the truth and you still stay. That's rare. I shook my head. I stayed because I was tricked. I married a lie. Her smile faltered. For the first time, something sharp flashed in her eyes. Then why? She whispered. Do you still crave me? I said nothing, but I knew she was right. Even now, terrified, disgusted, desperate, I wanted her. Or, I wanted what she pretended to be. The mask, the myth. That is how she hunts. Not with claws, with desire. She turned then, slowly, her voice fading into the hall. Follow me if you still want answers. And I did, because despite every horror, every scream, every ounce of dread, I still wanted to know. She led me to the east wing, a part of the manor no one entered. Doors were chained, curtains draped in cobwebs. But she had the key. One turn, one click. The scent hit me first. Rot, mold, old blood. Inside was a parlor long abandoned. Furniture covered in sheets, dust layered like snow. And in the center of the room, a box, a crate, nailed shut. She looked at me, eyes glittering. Open it. I hesitated. My fingers trembled. I pried off the lid. Inside bones. So many. Small. Human. Dozens of tiny rings still clinging to decayed fingers. Miriam's. Bastion's. Others I would never name. I collapsed to my knees. Why? I rasped. Why show me this? Why not just finish it? She crouched beside me, ran her hand through my hair. Because I don't want to kill you, she said. I want to keep you. I want you to choose me, knowing what I am. Her face inched closer. I could smell blood on her breath. Sweet, feral. Can you do that, love? Can you still love me? Even as the beast stares back. And in that moment, I didn't know, because her eyes were glowing, and I couldn't look away. Time is a funny thing in Hollow Manor. It stretches. It shrinks. It rearranges itself in ways that don't make sense. You blink and it's night. You swear you've only just stood up, and suddenly your teacup is cold. The fire has burned out, and the clock says you've lost 4 hours. I started noticing it after the bones, after the box. That day, I went to bed in shock, the weight of the truth pressing against my chest like stone. My hands still smelled of old wood and rot. My skin was streaked with dust from the room I never knew existed. I told myself I'd rest, just for a moment, just to think. But when I opened my eyes again, it was evening of the next day. I sat up with a jolt. My clothes were different. The sheets were tucked around me neatly, like someone had come in while I slept and reset me. My boots cleaned. My wounds, scratches I didn't remember getting, bandaged. And then I noticed the tray on the side table. Tea, fruit, a folded note. The note was sealed with wax. Black wax. Inside, in that perfect, elegant script of hers, you needed the rest, my love. Don't question the silence. Just enjoy the peace while it lasts. Peace. There was no peace in this house. Only shadows playing house. I wandered the halls, trying to make sense of the missing day. I asked the maids what few remained if they'd seen me, spoken to me. They averted their eyes. One girl dropped her tray and ran. I went to the east wing where the room of bones had been. Gone. Not just locked. Vanished. The entire wall was sealed with new paneling. No door. No crate. No trace. As though the horror I'd uncovered had folded back into the house itself. I slammed my fists against the wall, desperate for a seam, a crack, something to prove I wasn't losing my mind. That's when I heard the footsteps. Soft, uneven. I turned, and there she stood. Miriam, the girl who had vanished. The one whose letter I had read. Her eyes were wide, rimmed in red. Her hair was tangled, her skin blotched with bruises. But it was her. Alive. I rushed to her. Miriam, my God, where were you? What did she? She raised a trembling finger to her lips. Shoo. And then, with shaking hands, she pulled down the scarf wrapped tightly around her neck. Her throat had been stitched. Fresh, angry sutures ran from jaw to collarbone. Her tongue was gone. My stomach turned. I stepped back, horror crawling up my spine. Did she do this to you? Tears welled in her eyes. She nodded once. But before I could ask more, she began to sign. Fingers twitching, forming crude, urgent shapes. I didn't understand most of it, but 3 words I could make out clearly. Not just her. I froze. What do you mean? She pointed to the ceiling, then to the floor, then to the walls. Her eyes darted left and right. She mouthed something slowly, painfully. It watches. And then she fled. Gone down a passage I didn't recognize. Her feet barely touched the ground. I chased after her. Through corridors that twisted wrong. Turned when they shouldn't. Stairs that led down and down again where no stairs had ever been before. And at the bottom I found it. A room. Round. Stone walls. Candles burned in iron sconces, though no one had lit them. In the center, a circle carved into the floor. Symbols older than any language I knew. Blood filled the grooves. And above it all, etched into the domed ceiling. The bride is the gate. The house is the prison. It wasn't just her. The manor itself was alive. A being. Presence. And Seraphine, she was its keeper. Or its weapon. That's when I felt it, the pressure. Not a hand. Not a sound. But a presence. Watching. Breathing. I turned. Seraphine stood in the doorway. Her eyes glowed with that unnatural light again. Pale gold. Not of this world. Her skin shimmered like moonlight on the surface of oil. You weren't meant to see this yet, she said, voice calm, measured. You've been wandering where you shouldn't. What is this place? I asked, heart pounding. What are you? She didn't answer right away. She walked to the circle, stood inside it. The blood didn't touch her. It recoiled. There was a time, she began, when I was human, when I loved, when I feared. But this house, it doesn't care for love. It wants hunger. It feeds on it. She looked up at the symbols above her. I became its bride, not by vow, by sacrifice. And now, it gives me beauty, immortality, as long as I feed it. And the others? Offerings. Some vanish. Some become part of the walls. Some, she smiled sadly, run until their lungs collapse in the gardens. I felt sick. And me? I asked, voice hollow. She stepped closer. The glow in her eyes dimmed. Something human flickered there, briefly. You are the first one I've loved in centuries. You remind me of the life I lost. The man I once gave my soul to. I shook my head. This isn't love. This is manipulation. This is evil. Her voice hardened. Evil? Look around you. This house has seen war, plague, famine. And it still stands. I still stand. The world feeds on the weak. I've simply learned to survive. At what cost? She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward, reached into her gown, and held out something. A locket. Inside it, 2 portraits. One of me, the other of her, only younger. Human. Soft. You don't remember, do you? She whispered. I blinked. Remember what? Her smile returned. Bitter. Knowing. This is not our first time. The house resets. Recycles. Replays. You've always come to me. In every cycle. Every life. And you always ask the same question. That's impossible. But even as I denied it, something cracked open in my mind. A memory. Faint. A feeling. Her hand in mine on a different day. A wedding. But not the one we just had. A different one. Older. Fogged with time. I staggered backward. No. No, I'd remember. You will, she whispered. Soon. And then she vanished. Not walked away. Not ran. She was simply gone. I collapsed to the floor, knees buckling beneath the weight of it all. The house. The cycles. The truth. And in that moment, I realized something even worse than the monster I married. I might not be the victim. I might be part of the story already written. I should have run. After what she told me. After the locket, the names, the impossible memories. I should have fled into the night, into the woods, into the mouth of anything that wasn't this house. But instead, I stayed. Trapped not by walls, but by something deeper. Doubt. It had rooted itself inside me, twisted around my spine, and whispered, "What if she's right?" Because I had always felt it, hadn't I? The feeling that I'd been here before. The next morning, I awoke with something new. Pain. Not the ache of fear or grief. Something physical. Burning. Sharp. I pulled back my sleeve and stared at my forearm. A symbol, etched into my skin like it had grown there overnight. Not a wound. Not a tattoo. Something older. A spiral, intersected by a vertical slash, encircled in lines that reminded me of the symbols I'd seen carved into the stone chamber beneath the manor. At first, I thought I'd scratched myself in my sleep, but the skin wasn't broken. It was smooth. The mark was under the surface, as if my body had always carried it, and something had simply brought it forward. I staggered to the wash basin, splashing water on my face, my heart racing. And then I noticed it again. Time. It was afternoon. I had gone to bed near dawn. I remembered lying there, whispering my own name again and again to stay sane. And yet, here I was, 7 hours gone. My clothes changed, the mark burning like a brand. I didn't ask questions this time. I searched. The staff avoided me now. Their eyes darted like hunted animals. Some had begun wearing charms, small wooden carvings, iron pendants around their necks. I asked one young boy what it meant. He only said, "They say you're changing." That was when I decided to go where no one was allowed. The attic. At the far end of the upper floor, hidden behind a faded tapestry depicting a harvest scene, was a narrow staircase, winding, choked with dust, the kind of passage built for servants in centuries past. I climbed it. Every step creaked, like it was warning her. Or the house. Or both. The attic smelled of moths and parchment. The air was dry, sharp. Light pierced through slats in the wooden shutters, forming stripes of gold across the darkness. And there, beneath a massive white sheet, I saw shapes. Stacked. Silent. Portraits. Dozens of them. I pulled the sheet off. The dust burst upward like ash. And there I was, over and over again. Me, painted in oils. In styles that spanned centuries. In uniforms I'd never worn. Hairstyles from eras I only knew through books. But always my face. Sometimes with Seraphine beside me. Sometimes alone. Sometimes younger. Sometimes aged. But always me. I backed away. My breath caught in my throat. My knees gave out. I dropped to the floor, gripping my head as flashes tore through my brain. Images I didn't recognize but felt. A fire in a grand ballroom. A child crying my name. The taste of wine laced with something bitter. A knife sinking into skin, mine or hers. I didn't know. And then her voice. Not in my ears. In my skull. "Do you see now? You've always returned. You belong to me." I screamed. I punched the floor. I tore at the canvas with my bare hands. The portraits shredded like silk. But there were more. Endless. Buried behind crates. Lined up like memories waiting to be rediscovered. And beneath one, smaller than the rest, I found a book. Not like the journal from before. This was bound in hide. Not leather. Something coarser. Stiff. Inside, parchment soaked in strange dyes. An ink not black, but rust-colored. Dried blood. It wasn't a journal. It was a ledger. A record of husbands. Each name. Each date. Each fate. Some marked with symbols. Some crossed out violently. The last entry, scrawled with erratic lines. Everard Thorne marked for reclamation. Cycle 8. Rebellion, probable. I dropped the book like it burned. Cycle 8. Not my first time. Not my second. My 8th. Had I tried to fight her before? Had I escaped? Was I the fool who kept walking into the same death with eyes wide open? I clutched my stomach, nausea twisting like barbed wire. I wanted to scream, cry, run. Anything to claw my way out of this fate. And then I heard it again. Footsteps. Not hers. Barefoot. Small. Dragging. I turned. At the attic's far corner stood Miriam. She pointed to the book. Then to me. And mouthed something I could almost understand now. "Remember." I staggered down the stairs like a man escaping fire. The hallways shifted around me. Paintings that hadn't been there before now lined the walls. Of Seraphine in different dresses, centuries apart, always radiant, always eternal. And just one of me, not smiling, weeping, tied to a chair, arms outstretched, eyes rolled back. My signature was carved into the corner. I don't remember painting it, but my hand did. That night I didn't sleep, not because I was afraid, but because I didn't know who I was anymore. Not truly. And as the wind howled against the shutters, and hollow manor breathed around me, I knew one thing with certainty. She was right. I didn't come here by accident. I came because I always do. The manor does not sleep. Even when the walls lie still and the wind fades to silence, something within continues to pulse. Slow, steady, like a hidden heartbeat. And on that night, after the attic revealed my faces across the centuries, I realized something worse than the house's hunger. It remembers me, and worse still, it learns from me. I kept to my chambers after discovering the ledger, the record of husbands, the evidence of my endless returns. I didn't eat. I didn't drink. Every creak outside the door made me flinch. I knew Seraphine would come eventually. She always did. Not to harm. Not at first, but to tame. I'd seen the pattern now. Felt it through time. First the charm. Then the comfort. Then the confusion. And finally the consumption. Only this time, I had one thing I'd never had before. Memory. It started in pieces. A flash of flames. A hand holding mine, pulling me through snow. A voice crying, "Not again! Not again!" And then the circle. The symbols. The one beneath the house. Not just a room of sacrifice. A place of binding. That's when it clicked. I hadn't just been a victim. I had been part of it. I returned to the stone chamber beneath Hollow Manor. Not through the servants' stairs this time, but through the east corridor where the blood markings had first appeared. They were gone now, cleaned, but I remembered every step. The air was heavier than before, the silence deeper, as though the manor knew I was coming back not to beg, but to fight. At the center of the floor lay the ancient circle, faded, cracked, but still humming with power. I stepped inside it, and the mark on my forearm began to glow. Not burn, not sting, pulse, like it recognized the stone. I knelt and placed my palm flat in the center. The room exhaled, and then I saw it. A vision, a memory, a truth wrapped in smoke and ash. The past. I stood in a version of the manor that was not yet decayed. Stone freshly laid, fire blazing, candles everywhere, and at the center of it all Seraphine. But not as she is now. Younger, human, terrified, and beside her, me. A man named Everard in every lifetime. Yet this version was different, wilder, fiercer. I watched as we stood before the circle, as we held hands, as we spoke the words. We bind ourselves to the house, so we shall never part. It wasn't a curse laid upon us. It was a choice, pact, a ritual of desperate love. And then the change. The house opened, took root in her, gave her eternal beauty, gave me the mark. But there was a cost. One must become the keeper, the other the anchor. And every cycle since, we'd lived the same story. Love, loss, return. Only I forgot. She never did. I pulled my hand from the stone and gasped. My skin was slick with sweat. The mark on my arm now fully lit. Seraphine had kept me close, not to devour me, but to ensure the ritual would hold, that I would remain the anchor, that I could never leave. And yet, part of me had always resisted, fought back in subtle ways, escaped perhaps, died early, tried to destroy the bond. That's why she kept trying, repeating, correcting the pattern. This time she thinks I'll stay. But now I knew the truth. And truth is the first weapon in rebellion. I went to the manor's ancient library next. A vault of texts bound in dust and secrets. I wasn't looking for escape. I was looking for the counter-ritual. It had to exist. No magic is eternal without balance. For something to be bound, it must be possible to unbind. I scoured old tomes, deciphered dead languages, traced ink that had long faded into the pages. And finally, beneath a false bottom in a book titled Bindings and Blood, I found it. To unbind what was sealed by love, one must offer love still beating. Not dead, not drained, not lost. The bond must be broken where it began, with truth, with pain, with fire. It made sense now. This was not just a tale of monsters and men. This was a tragedy caught on repeat. A love turned toxic, eternal, undying not by romance, but by ritualized obsession. Night fell like a curtain soaked in ink. Seraphine came to me again. No pretense this time. No silk gowns. No honeyed words. She stood at the doorway of my chamber, barefoot, eyes glowing, her hair like liquid darkness down her back. "You remember now," she said. I didn't answer. "You always do. Eventually." Still, I said nothing. "You asked for this, Everard. In every life. You begged the house to keep us. You carved the vows into the stone yourself. You promised me forever. And we've been dying for it ever since," I finally said. She stepped closer. Her skin rippled, not visibly, but something beneath it moved. "You think breaking the ritual will set you free? I think it might set us free." She looked at me like a woman betrayed, as if I'd turned my back on a lifetime of loyalty. "Without you, I rot. The house collapses. We unravel. Then maybe we were never supposed to last." She reached for me. Her fingers were cold. Not lifeless, just wrong. "Say you still love me," she whispered. "Say it, and the cycle can rest." And for a moment I almost did, because part of me remembered. The love, the vows, the shared pain. But the stronger part, the part that had suffered, broken, died 8 times over, spoke instead. "I loved you once, but I don't love this." Her eyes darkened. She stepped back, and the entire house shuddered. I don't know how long I stood in that room after she vanished. Not left, vanished. Like mist recoiling from flame. But her voice lingered. Her breath seemed to still coil through the air, ghosting across the nape of my neck. Even the fire in the hearth had died the moment I denied her. And then the house began to change. Not just in the way it always creaked or moaned. No, this was different. This was awakening. The floor groaned underfoot as I stepped into the corridor. Everything was wrong. The paintings along the walls had shifted. Where once there had been landscapes and noble ancestors, now there were portraits of me. Each one twisted, eyes gouged out in some, mouths sewn shut in others. One showed me burning. Another showed me kneeling at her feet, with a collar around my neck. Each canvas whispered my name, not aloud. Inside, like hundreds of fragments of me had been caught in paint, screaming silently across lifetimes. I turned to flee the hallway, but it was gone. So was the door to my chamber. So was the library. So was the entire eastern wing. The house was rearranging itself, like a beast drawing its prey deeper into its throat. I ran. Not because I thought I could escape. I knew now that escape was never the point. I ran because I had to find her again, the mute girl, Miriam. She had seen more than anyone. She had survived. She would know what came next. But the halls twisted with every step. Doors led to brick walls. Stairs looped back to the same corridor. One room had no ceiling. Just stars above, swirling too fast, as if time itself were unraveling. Then I heard the whispers. Low, male, familiar. They came from behind a bolted door at the end of a narrow passageway I didn't remember entering. I pried it open, and there, lit only by a single lantern, stood me. Younger, eyes wide, skin pale, fingernails bloody from clawing at the door. He turned, mouth trembling. "Don't go any further," he said. "You'll only come back again." My throat closed. "Who are you?" He laughed, bitter, hollow. "I'm Everard version 5, I think. Or maybe 6. We lose count." I backed away. This was impossible. But everything in this place had broken the laws of the world I thought I knew. He stepped forward, raising his hand. The same mark on his arm. Same place. Same spiral. We've all tried to break the cycle. Burned the house. Killed her. Killed ourselves. Nothing works. She always brings us back. Not this time, I said. That's what I said. I turned. I had to keep moving. If I stayed too long, I might become him. Just another echo locked in the house's rotting heart. Eventually, I found her. Miriam, curled in the kitchen cellar. Her eyes wild with fear. Her hands trembling with another string of broken signs. I grabbed her shoulders gently. You know the ritual. You've seen it. Help me break it. She hesitated, then nodded. She led me through a narrow tunnel hidden behind the old icebox. It dropped steeply underground, beneath the stone chamber I had visited before. The walls here were older, slick with moisture, covered in carvings so worn, they seemed to breathe as we passed. At the end, a round chamber. No candles, only roots, thick, black roots, emerging from every wall, pulsing with life. The center held a stone table, and on it, the altar. Not a place of worship, place of debt. Miriam knelt. She reached into her blouse and pulled out something I hadn't seen before. A knife, silver, etched with the same spiral that now glowed on my arm. She placed it in my hand, her eyes wide, pleading. And then she placed her palm against my chest, over my heart. Still beating, the phrase from the counter-ritual echoed in my skull. To unbind what was sealed by love, one must offer love still beating. But I didn't understand. I looked at the altar again. This was no place for a symbolic act. This was where something bled. Suddenly, the roots pulsed faster. The air trembled. And then she was there. Seraphine stepped out from the shadows. Her form was changing again. No longer entirely beautiful, no longer entirely monstrous. Her face was soft but flickering. Beneath it, something ancient and eyeless blinked through. You brought him here, she said to Miriam. Traitor. The girl stood, and for the first time she spoke. No tongue, no voice, but her scream rang through the chamber like the shattering of glass. And Seraphine screamed back, a sound not meant for human ears. I turned, raised the knife, pointed it at the spiral on my arm. Seraphine lunged. You do this, Everard, and you erase us, all of us. Do you want to live alone? Die alone? Come back again broken? But I understood now. This wasn't about dying. This was about reclaiming the will to choose. I sliced into the mark. Blood poured red, hot, endless. The roots screamed. The chamber trembled. Seraphine collapsed, convulsing. Her voice fractured into hundreds of voices. Young, old, male, female. The house moaned. The stone altar cracked. Miriam grabbed my hand, pulled me back. The blood spilled down the grooves of the altar, lighting up the chamber like veins. And then the roots snapped, one by one. Seraphine looked up. No beauty left, just hollow sorrow. You said you'd love me forever. Forever isn't freedom, I whispered. The chamber exploded in silence. A light swallowed everything. And then, nothing. I awoke to cold. Not the kind that lingers in shadows or drifts in through broken windows. This was deeper, raw, wet, earth deep. My fingers twitched against soil. Damp leaves pressed against my cheek. Overhead, the sky spun in muted gray spirals. For the first time since entering Hollow Manor, the silence felt honest. No whispers behind walls. No distant sobbing. No shifting halls beneath my feet. Just wind, trees, and the soft hush of falling leaves. I was outside, alive, alone. My first thought was how my last memory had been blood, my blood, spilling over the altar. The silver blade warm in my hand. Seraphine's voice shattered across 1,000 lifetimes. The chamber splitting, the roots screaming, and then, light, not white, not divine, just a light that ended things. I sat up, my body stiff like it had lain there for days. No wounds, no mark on my forearm. But when I pressed my hand against my chest, I felt it. A scar, just over the heart. The price for freedom, it seemed, was remembering. Because I remembered everything now. Every cycle, every version of myself. The vows, the betrayals, the longing, the deaths, and her, always her. Hollow Manor no longer stood behind me. What remained was rubble, twisted stone and splintered beams, swallowed by vines. Where once there had been grandeur and terror, now stood a ruin, as though time had rushed in to reclaim what the ritual had preserved. But something felt unfinished. I looked around and found no trace of Miriam. No trail, no footsteps, only a single object, left just beside me, half buried in soil. A locket, hers. Inside, no portraits, just a folded scrap of parchment. 5 words, written in trembling ink. Find her before she returns. I should have been relieved, but I wasn't, because Seraphine's end had felt too quiet, too clean, and Hollow Manor, even in ruins, still pulsed faintly beneath my skin, like a memory that refuses to die. I knew where I had to go next. The graveyard. Not the manicured cemetery where the Everard name stood proud. The real one. The one behind the manor, hidden beneath the weeping pines. The place where the first foundations had been laid. Where time bent. Where she was buried before she ever became what she did. It took hours to find the path. Overgrown, swallowed by nature. Trees clawed at my coat. Vines tripped my steps. The wind spoke in a language I almost understood, each gust carrying fragments of forgotten vows. And then I saw it. The gate, iron, twisted. Beyond it, rows of crumbling headstones. Some toppled, some blank, some with names I now remembered having worn like borrowed clothes. I wandered through them slowly, and then I stopped, because there, at the very back, partially buried beneath moss and leaves, was a grave marked only by one thing, a scarred spiral, the same symbol that had once burned on my arm. No name, no dates, but something had been carved beneath it, faint, barely legible. The bride still dreams. I stared at the earth beneath my feet. This was no ordinary grave. It radiated cold, not the chill of death, the presence of something waiting. I scrambled to my feet. Who are you? My fingers itched to dig, not out of madness, not out of fear, but because something beneath that soil was calling to me. I dropped to my knees and began to pull away the dirt, clump after clump, in silence, until my hand struck something solid. Wood, old, splintering, but not a coffin. A box. I pried it open with shaking hands. Inside, a faded wedding veil, stained dark at its center. A ring, blackened with ash. A parchment scroll wrapped in leather string. I unrolled the scroll, and this time it wasn't written by me. It was written by her. If you are reading this, it means I failed again. Or you did. Or both of us. I buried this part of me because I feared what I had become. But the house never let me forget. Not truly. I wanted to stop. I wanted to stop needing, wanting, feeding. But love is hunger too. Isn't it? You asked how it began. It wasn't the house. It was the vow. It was the moment I said yes. And the moment you meant it. That's when it started. That's when the house opened. Because something heard us. Something older than love. And it offered us forever. But only one of us ever stopped paying. The others, they were fuel. You were always the fire. But if you're digging now, then maybe, just maybe, you're ready to bury it all. Find the grave where I was still human. Not this one. The first. The true. And when you find it, burn it. Burn me. End it for good. I dropped the scroll. Breath caught in my throat. There was another grave. A hidden one. Before the house. Before the ritual. Before the curse. Where Seraphine had been laid to rest as a woman, not a beast. And until that place was found and destroyed, the cycle would sleep. Not end. Sleep. Which meant she could wake again. Stronger. Smarter. With no manner to contain her. And no tether to hold her still. As I stood over the box, the locket heavy in my palm, I whispered a question into the wind. Why didn't you burn it yourself? And the wind answered. Not in words, but in laughter. Soft. Familiar. Haunting. The scroll trembled in my hands, though no wind touched it. The ink, brown, smudged and flaking, felt like it could vanish at any moment, like the memory it carried barely had permission to exist. The words echoed in my mind long after I rolled the parchment closed. Find the grave where I was still human. Not the grave I'd found. Not the one marked by a spiral and veiled in mourning. The first one. The real one. That night I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I sat at the edge of the graveyard, the forgotten box of relics in my lap, watching the trees sway like they were whispering to each other. I knew I wasn't alone. Not truly. The woods had always watched. Now I was finally seeing their eyes. Every now and then, something shifted in the brush. Too quiet for an animal, too slow for a man. But I knew better than to call out. I was being followed. By or maybe remembered. Morning, the ground was soaked with dew. My hands were raw. My boots caked in layers of mud. Still I searched. Behind the gravestones. Beneath the collapsed mausoleums. Underneath vines that clung to stone like jealous hands. And all I found were names I didn't recognize. None hers. None mine. None that fit what I was looking for, a resting place not bound by blood, but by loss. Until just before noon, when I stumbled upon a hill I hadn't seen before. It wasn't hidden. Not exactly. It had just never appeared. Not to me. Not until now. The path to it was narrow, a ribbon of dry grass lined with crumbled statues, limbless angels, hollow-eyed saints. Each seemed turned away from the hill, their backs facing the summit like they refused to acknowledge what lay at the top. And there, alone, crooked, stood a gravestone so worn it barely had shape. No words, no carvings, just absence. But the earth told the story the stone could not. It was fresh, not recently dug but recently disturbed. Not by shovels, by time itself. I fell to my knees. Something inside me stirred, recognition, not of the place, but of what it held. And for the first time since I left the manor, I spoke her name aloud. Seraphine. The wind responded, a sharp gust that made the trees bow. And then the laughter, faint, childlike. Wrong. I turned. A girl stood at the base of the hill. Not Miriam, taller, skin pale as ivory, dressed in a white gown stained at the hem. Her hair hung over her face, but I could still see her mouth, smiling and moving. It's not over. She tilted her head. You don't remember yet. Then she pointed to the grave behind me. She didn't burn. She burrowed. She sank through soil and silence. And the deeper she went, the more she became what you feared. You buried her in love. You'll have to dig her out in pain. Then she vanished. No footsteps. No parting of leaves. Just gone. I looked back at the grave and dug. With hands. With rocks. With anything I could use. Hours passed. Blood slicked my fingernails. My breath burned in my lungs. I tore through layers of earth like a man possessed. Until I struck stone. A slab. Heavy. Etched faintly with symbols worn down by time. Not spirals. Runes. Not like the others. These weren't for worship. They were warnings. I braced myself and pried it loose. And what I found beneath nearly made me collapse. Coffin. Old. Splintered. But intact. Not sealed with nails, but bound in rope, thick. Ancient rope covered in wax and wrapped in a pattern I'd seen only once before. The binding circle. The same that had existed beneath Hollow Manor. Only this one was inverted. Prison, not a pact. I hesitated. Then reached for the blade I'd taken from the altar. The same one that had severed the mark from my arm. Pulsed in my hand. Not warm. Not cold. Just ready. I sliced through the rope. And the moment it snapped, the wind stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. As though the world had taken a breath and refused to exhale. I opened the coffin. She lay there. Not as a monster. Not as a goddess. But as a girl. Seraphine. Barely 16. Skin like porcelain. Eyes closed. Hands crossed over her chest. But there was something wrong. Her lips twitched. Her throat convulsed. And then her eyes opened. Not gold. Black. A voice slithered from her mouth. But it wasn't hers. Too late, Everard. She's not trapped anymore. I staggered back. The body rose, levitating. Her joints snapped as she moved, as though waking from centuries of stillness. From her chest, tendrils of shadow emerged, thick as rope, fast as lightning. They wrapped around my arm, yanked me toward the coffin. And from the dark pit behind her eyes, I saw something looking back. Not Seraphine. Something that had used her like a shell, that had waited for this moment. You gave her your love. Now give me your soul. And then screaming. Not hers. Not mine. From the trees. Dozens of voices. Hundreds. All my past selves. The ones trapped in cycles. Locked in paintings. Buried in the walls of Hollow Manor. They were here. And they were fighting back. The tendrils dragged me backward. Not across earth or air, but through something else. Space folded in on itself. Light fractured. The forest, the grave, the sky. All peeled away like old wallpaper until only a strange gray void remained. A place without edges, without sound, without escape. And within it, voices. Hundreds, thousands, all mine. Every version of myself that had lived and died across the cycles. Some whispering, some screaming, and others laughing. I stood, or floated, or dreamed I was doing both. The space was neither hot nor cold, but it felt heavy, like the pressure of water pressing against my ribs, just before lungs give out. And then he stepped forward. Not a shadow, not a memory. Me, wearing a soldier's coat from a war I didn't remember. His face pale, one eye scarred shut, his hands blackened with soot. We died in fire, he said, trying to burn the house. Didn't even make it past the front gate. Behind him, another version emerged. Younger, eyes hollow, clothes torn. We drank poison, he said quietly. Took her hand before the end. More appeared. One with a noose still wrapped around his neck. One with blood still dripping from his wrists. Each one a grave dressed in my skin. Each one a story of failure. Why are you here? I asked, my voice thin. The one-eyed soldier laughed. Because you opened the coffin. Because you touched the heart of the curse. Because you broke the wrong seal. The void pulsed. From all directions, the ground rose into a hall long, endless, lined with doors. Some wooden, some steel, some made of bone and smoke. I turned. I ran. Not out of fear but instinct. To find something that made sense. Every door I passed bore a name. Mine. Followed by a number. Everard Thorne, attempt 1. Everard Thorne, attempt 2. Everard Thorne, attempt 3. On and on it went. And then, at the center of the hallway, one door glowed faintly red. There was no number. No title. Only a carved phrase. The beginning. I opened it. Behind the door was a chapel. But not one of God. No crosses. No candles. Just 2 chairs. A basin. A parchment laid on a stone altar. And Seraphine. Human. Young. Smiling. She turned to me. Not the monster. Not the eternal bride. But the girl before the hunger. You finally came. This is where we said yes. I stepped forward slowly. The air crackling with memory. You remember it all? I asked. She nodded. Most of it. Not the pain. Not all the deaths. But I remember what we were before. I looked at the parchment on the altar. The ink had not faded. A vow. We bind ourselves beyond death. We bind ourselves beyond time. No cycle shall end until love is undone. I reached for the parchment, but her hand stopped mine. You can't just tear it. Then what do I do? She looked down, her voice cracking. You forgive me. Silence. Of all the monsters she had become, all the lives she'd taken, all the torment she'd caused, she now stood before me. Not as a predator, but as a woman who had made a terrible promise. And I who had helped seal it. But something in the room changed. The light dimmed. A shadow slid beneath the door behind us. And Seraphine gasped. She's coming. Who? I asked. The thing that answered our vow. I thought you were the curse. She shook her head. No, I was the host. The door burst open. Darkness flooded the chapel, not like night, like absence. an emptiness so vast it howled. From it a shape emerged. Not her. Not me. Not human. The voice that followed was all voices at once. Male. Female. Child. Ancient. You wanted forever, it said. And now you'll have it. It reached for us with arms made of shifting ash. Seraphine clutched my hand. Forgive me now, she said. Please. Before it takes us. Why now? Because you're the last version left. You're the only one that still feels. My throat tightened. I looked at her, and I saw everything. Her hunger, her grief, her longing, her mistakes. My own guilt burned just as deeply. And so, I did the only thing I could. I whispered, I forgive you. The parchment on the altar burst into flame. The walls of the chapel cracked. And the thing in the doorway screamed. The hall fractured. Every door burst open. Versions of me spilled out. Screaming, laughing, weeping, burning. The void buckled. And the flame, born from that simple act of grace, consumed it all. I clutched Seraphine's hand as the world collapsed around us. And she smiled. Not in madness. Not in victory. In peace. The last thing I heard before the light took me was her voice. Soft. Free. Tell the next me. She doesn't have to become me. The first breath I took felt like drowning in reverse. Not water. Not fire. Just air, pure and real and impossibly still. I opened my eyes. Gone was the void. Gone the endless hall of past selves. The whispering doors. The monstrous shadow that had spoken with every voice I'd ever known. Gone was Seraphine. And in her place, light, warm, soft, not blinding, not divine. The kind of light that falls through trees on the first day of spring. The kind that smells like wet bark and forgotten flowers. I sat up slowly and realized I was in a house, not Hollow Manor, not any place I'd ever seen. It was modest, wooden floors, sun streaming through lace-curtain windows, a fireplace with no fire, only unburnt logs resting in a tidy pile. Dust floated peacefully in the stillness. On the walls were no portraits, no spirals, no hidden eyes watching me, just calm. I rose to my feet, cautious, expecting someone to appear, but all I found were signs of life. A worn teacup, a faded book of pressed flowers left half open on a table, a coat hanging by the door, and a single slip of paper resting on a wooden writing desk near the window. My name was on it, Everard. I unfolded it, and read. This is what it would have been. The life before the vow, before the hunger, before the house. You earned this, but the rest is up to you. My fingers trembled as I folded the note. Some part of me wanted to stay, to forget, to begin again as someone new in a place without shadows. But something stirred outside the window. I stepped closer, and saw it. A woman. Her. But not Seraphine the beast. Not the bride. Not the myth. Just a girl. Sitting on a bench beneath a tree in the golden hour light. No gown. No blood. No secrets. Just silence. And a second chance. I stepped outside. The sun warmed my skin. My heart beat steady. No cursed mark. No spectral weight pressing on my shoulders. She turned when I approached. And for the first time she looked afraid. Not of me. Of herself. Of what might return. You came, she said quietly. I never stopped, I replied. We stood in silence for a moment. She looked down at her hands, fingers fidgeting, unsure. Her voice cracked as she asked, Do you remember everything? I nodded. All of it. She swallowed. Even the things I did? What I became? Yes. Tears formed at the corners of her eyes. Then why are you still here? I knelt in front of her, took her hand in mine. Because I also remember who you were before that. A wind passed through the clearing, and in it I felt it, the final thread of the vow, the last tendril of a curse bound by fear, obsession, and grief, unraveling. She gasped and clutched her chest. It's leaving me. I nodded. Let it go. But without it, I don't know who I am. Then let's find out. The sky rippled above us. like time itself had sighed. And in that instant, I saw all the versions of myself, of her, of everything that had come before, each fading, each at peace. No more halls, no more hunger, just the possibility of something new. We stood together beneath that tree as the last shadow passed. The locket Miriam had given me pulsed once in my pocket, then cracked quietly in two. Its light died, and with it, the past. Later that day, we walked into the nearby village. People greeted us like old friends. They didn't ask questions. They didn't see monsters. They saw a man and a woman beginning again. And on the mantel of our modest home, I placed something small and sacred, the blade from the ritual, now rusted, dull, but no longer cursed, just a reminder of a love that was broken, twisted, resurrected, and finally, released. You want more chilling true crime stories like this one? Don't forget to subscribe to the Veil of Secrets.